second webinar in a 5-webinar series on risk management. Today is the second, and it's called Safe Steps, Part 1, Screening Volunteers and Paid Staff. My name is David Hartley, and I'll be facilitating the session today. If you had a chance to join us in the first webinar, we had a lot of technological problems, but we re-recorded it, and so that's available on the website for you to listen to at any time. And thank you for your patience as we're learning to do the technology here. So again, my name is David, and my background, up until I was 40, I worked about 15 years training insurance brokers and insurance staff at 3 large insurance companies here in Canada. And then in approximately 5 years ago, I became the director of the Insurance and Liability Resource Center for Nonprofits at a charity called Imagine Canada. And I've been the director of that center and had a chance to speak to about 9,000 nonprofit leaders in the last 5 years in over about 70 Canadian cities and towns. And it's been a terrific opportunity. So I'm really glad to be able to be here with you today. I've had a chance to speak to every kind of nonprofit across the country from coast to coast to coast, and lots of nonprofits that work with new immigrants, and what a great job you do. So thank you for joining us on the line today. So the presentation will be from 10:30 to 11:30. I'll be speaking, doing a presentation. We can't hear you, but you can type in your questions or comments in the comment or in the question box, and Petra will get a chance to put those questions together. At 11:30 till noon, approximately during that period there, I'll be going through any questions or comments that you sent in. So I won't see them when you send them in right away. They'll be put together, and I'll get a chance to look at them between 11:30 and noon. So just a reminder, your phones are muted during the webinar, so we can never hear you. Hopefully you can hear me. If you have any technical issues at all, you can type them in your chat box as well, and we'll get to you. We want to say thank you to the Ontario Trillium Foundation and Citizenship and Immigration Canada for the funding that they provide to OCASI to do this work, and I want to thank OCASI for the opportunity to do this today. So my 3 goals with these 5 webinars: number 1, to help you find practical ways to find and manage your key risks. And the key word there is practical, because a lot of training, by the time you leave, you're not really sure what you can do with it. It might have been fun, enjoyable, but if you don't leave with practical tips and tools, it's not very useful. I'll talk to you today about all kinds of things that you're going to get out of this. Not only, hopefully, did you receive the 3 documents, the PDF, the PowerPoint, and 2 other PDFs, but you will notice that we're going to be putting up 8 other documents on volunteer and employment screening that you'll be able to get at the website. I'll mention that in a moment. So we have lots of practical tools for you in this area of screening. Number 2, help you engage your people so your policies and tools actually work. This is a big thing for me. It's a great thing to have tools, but if your people don't know what they are or don't want to use them, then it's not going to work. So you really have to find a way to work with your people. I'll talk about that in a moment. Number 3 is to try and make this engaging and fun. And so I hope you really do find it's a webinar, so it's difficult to be too engaging, but that's why we're hoping you'll type in comments and questions. Last time that didn't happen, but we know there was a lot of technical issues. I'm hoping this time you'll be typing some comments in the chat box, and you can see that we'll spend time in that from 11:30 to 12 at the end of our session today. So even though it's risk management, we definitely are going to try to have fun. I was going to say, Petra, those are your feet, but I'm pretty sure they're not. So, all right. So here's a few pictures of across the country that are, as a risk manager, that I find pretty interesting. This is a Purell that's pretty dirty. Slow down, the cop hides behind the sign. I'm not sure the cop sees that. At Christmas time, a house where they, instead of putting up lights, just said ditto. And that's probably one of the funniest things I've seen in a long time. I fly a lot, and here's a duck just looking in the window. I can freak you out anytime you see that. Patient bear. We'll be ready when you are. Kind of like that bear. Well, risk management gone wrong for these dinosaurs, and I guess this is how dinosaurs cease to exist. Mother's Day for an egg. Sing a chicken, and yes, that's my source of humor. There we go. And there we go. End of a buffet, open the fortune cookie, and it says, that wasn't chicken. Well, our 5 webinars, we did Introduction to Risk Management on February 29th, and I hope you get a chance to go back and see that. We re-recorded a clean version of it, and I think you're going to enjoy it. I hope you can not only listen to it yourself, but pass it along to other members of OCASI so that they can enjoy it as well. Today we're doing screening volunteers and paid staff. Next Wednesday, we'll be doing risk-proofing volunteers and paid staff after they join. My focus there will be orientation, training, boundaries, supervision, and performance management. The fourth one will be April 4th, managing your financial risk. Eric Plato, who was the CFO of YMCA here in Greater Toronto area, a large budget, and also has handled many small budgets. He's done a lot of training that I've been at. I really think you'll find him phenomenal at training budgets, which he's going to focus on it. And our final one in the series is governance risk, and something I really enjoy talking about, and that's creating an engaged, effective nonprofit board. If you are having issues in engaging your board or knowing how to handle the board, what sort of tools you can use, I'm going to show you things like how you can, in 5 seconds, tell whether your board agenda is valuable or not. So those are our webinars. I hope you're going to enjoy them. Today our focus is on screening. Just want to mention that our website here at Ocasio org-wise, you can find the first webinar there, but more than that, you're going to find all the webinars as they get up there. But today, there's 8 documents beyond the 3 that you've received that will be posted there. So you'll have 11 documents that have all kinds of resources and templates for you to manage the screening process of volunteers and staff. You're going to see them there at org-wise. So we're going to encourage you to go there and sign in and make use of the tools that are popping up there. Also, if questions come in during the week, questions and answers, we'll be posting those Q&As there as well. So a quick review of some of the core principles from the first webinar. Might I suggest to you, if you're sitting, wherever you're sitting right now, would you take a scrap piece of paper out and a pen and just write on the top of it, Bright Ideas page. What I'm going to ask you to do is, as we go through the webinar, something that comes up that you think that you could put into place at your organization, helping with your project work, would you write it down? So in other words, there's all kinds of ideas that are going to be flying at you today. But are there 2, 3, 4, 5 that you think would be very practical for you? So I'm going to suggest that you just rip out a piece of paper, put it next to your computer there. I know you probably have other things going on. I know what it's like to be at webinars. But I'm hoping that you're going to write down the key ideas that were practical for you. So I'll mention that. At the end, I'm going to ask you to write in how many different ideas you wrote down. Okay? So at the end of the webinar, I'm going to ask all of you to type in how many ideas did you write down on your Bright Ideas page. Okay, great. So last week I mentioned there's a lot of different risk areas, and I'm not going to go through them again today, but just to mention this issue of key staff loss. I've committed this year in 2012 to talk to nonprofit leaders just a few minutes about their health. Last time I mentioned this article, but I didn't actually have the details, but here I do this time. The 5 things you did today that you'd never guess are killing you. Are we seeing the screen? Everything's good. So 5 things you did today that you'd never guess are killing you. Well, the book that it comes from is The End of Illness. David Agus, he is the superstar oncologist who is, this book is #1 in Maclean's right now, and across the world. It's really taken the world by storm. But here's some ideas that he said. #1, vanquish vitamins. I'm a big vitamin guy. And here's an oncologist who's probably the most prominent oncologist, it's certainly the most prominent oncologist in the world today, is saying, stop taking vitamins. Well, my goodness, I take them every day. So he says, tumors eat vitamin C like candy. There's little evidence we're deficient in vitamin D and all those other things. So another thing, eat on schedule. So you as a leader, you're thinking, well, I'm coming to a risk management session. Why are you talking about health? Well, to me, as somebody who's traveled and met thousands of nonprofit leaders, so often the risk management's focused on their nonprofit that they forget to take care of themselves. They get sick, and you know, it becomes an unhealthy place. So I'd really like you to think about it. Eat on schedule. Try to eat fresh, unprocessed food, mostly plants, at the same time every day. So it's not just about what you eat. It's that your body's craving to eat at the same time. Now, I'm a bad example. I haven't put a thing in my mouth since about 1 o'clock last night. And I don't know if the other guys, did you guys eat a good breakfast this morning? You did. You did. Everybody here ate good breakfast, so I'm the only one that didn't. But I'm really bad at this. But the body actually releases toxins when you're not properly eating at the same time. So #2, heave the high heels. This is for women, although this is a pair of my shoes, I must admit. These are mine. I'm joking. Thank you for laughing, Petra. High heels stress the joints and back, and stress causes inflammation. And what this oncologist is saying is that inflammation leads to all kinds of bad things. So you want to be very cognizant of pain and move or die. Sitting down all day is almost as dangerous as smoking, even if you exercise every day. So what do we do for most of us in the nonprofit world who are leading? Many times we're sitting in a chair for most of the day, and that's really dangerous. So find a way to get up and walk around. And just a leadership tip on this one. As you walk through your office, wherever you're working, go slowly so your staff get to see your smiling face. It's so critical for nonprofits that they get their leader walking slowly and saying hello. Just as quickly as a hello and some eye contact that often doesn't happen. Then finally, get some good sleep. The body craves regularity. So just like eating the same time, the body's not as much about how many hours you get sleep, but that you're going to bed roughly the same time, Saturdays and Sundays as well, and rising at the same time each day. Okay. We mentioned the 7 deadly sins of risk management. I'm not going to go through them again, but there they are, and you can go through the detail of this in the first webinar and the 7 virtues there as well. But one thing I just want to quickly mention that I mentioned last week that's very important with screening is talk to your people about screening, the volunteers and staff that you already have, and talk to them about what works and what doesn't, and what the problems that they see that could happen as a volunteer or staff member. So critical. I mean, it's great sometimes to get an expert to come in, but generally speaking, your experts, the best experts, are the people that are already working for you. This I just tightened up a little bit from last time I want to mention. When you're doing risk management, create a workplace where it's very safe to ask questions and give ideas. Some nonprofit leaders, by their very nature, they're great people at getting tasks done, but they got thin skin, and they're very difficult for people to come up to them and say, I don't think the way we're doing things is the best way to go. And it's tough. I'm a thin-skinned person too, so I can add me to your group. I would love to have thicker skin, but we have to be able to, as leaders, to be able to ask our staff, look, if you've got concerns, issues, ideas that can help us to improve, please tell us. You know, this is a true open door policy where leaders hear ideas from staff and volunteers regularly. So here's a question, a real great risk management question. Are people coming into your office and bringing ideas? Right now, I can, as a leader, that's a quick aha moment for your page. You want to make sure that people are coming in. I know that you don't want people coming in too much so you can't get your work done. But as a leader, one of the critical tasks we have in terms of creating a healthy workplace and managing the risks is we make sure people can come in with a complaint, or a client had a concern, or you've got a great idea. Managing risk is not only just looking for the negative things that could happen. Managing risk means that we also are making sure the doors are open to hear good ideas or better ideas. So that's a really important issue for risk management. You know, I talk to leaders and I ask them, what makes a healthy nonprofit? What I often hear is statements like this. Are the staff and volunteers able to give their opinion without feeling that it's going to be taken as with a leader on their defensive, that somehow they're saying that they're not doing their job right? And that's why it's very, very critical. We want to create an organization where people feel very safe to ask questions and give ideas. Last week I also mentioned the key legal concepts. I explained how you can lose a lawsuit, what vicarious liabilities and joint several liability. You can go back to the first webinar to take a look. The key point in terms of the core concept is, that I mentioned in the first webinar, is we can't put our head in the sand. We have to actually, every 2-3 years, do a risk map and find out what risks do we face as an organization that's trying to serve new immigrants in the communities. What are the risks that we face that could really cause us harm? I showed you this risk map, but I've got a new one for you this week that I just wanted to point out. So if you're looking back at the first webinar, you can look at this. I just came across this week, and it's fantastic. So it's another way of looking at your risks in more detail. So this one has the red, orange, and yellow, but this one goes a little bit deeper, and you can see the low, medium, and high, and it's just an easier way of doing a risk map. If you want to know how to fill this out, go back to our first webinar. We really encourage you to pass it along too. Do this every couple of years. It's not hard to do, and explain in the first webinar how in fact to do it. So when you figured out every 2 or 3 years what your critical risks are, then you as a board and as senior leaders, you can actually figure out, okay, how are we going to figure out these risks? How are we going to fix these risks? Well, let's figure out, let's say that you've got 3 or 4 things that you've got to fix. And you got to do it rather quickly. Well, we're going to map out what's the one that's most important right now. And I talked about how you use garage sale stickers to do this in the last webinar. You map it out over the calendar and you figure out, here's how we're going to actually attempt to fix these. So I ended off last week's webinar, or sorry, the first webinar, with these core principles, and I need to start with these as I'm going into screening today. Protecting your people has to be the biggest priority. I suggest that making sure your people, and that includes your clients as well, are safe and making sure your reputation is safe is more important than the good work that you do. Your reputation in one night can be destroyed. A great organization doing great work, their reputation can be flipped over in one single day. So it's so important that we take the time to manage our risk. Number two, never create any sort of policy without using your volunteers or your staff who are doing the work. So I'm not going to create volunteer policy or a volunteer management manual without actually talking to the people who are my volunteers. They're the ones that know what rules work, what rules will never work. So it's not just buy-in, but it's because they know the risk and how to manage them. Put your most important policies in writing. There's always going to be non-written policies, unwritten policies. You know that there are some of your volunteers you would never match with certain clients because they would kill each other. Their personalities would just absolutely be difficult to deal with together. So all kinds of unwritten risk management that you do because you know your people, you know your clients. However, the most critical issues need to be put in writing so that if a lawsuit ever happened, you could show it. Not only that, but how many years are you going to be there as leader? Will you be there 10 years from now? Well, maybe you will, but maybe you won't. And so the great stuff that you do, you need to put it in writing so that it can continue from decade to decade. Number four, make sure it's simple and concise. When I work with organizations, whether, any sort of organization, whether they have a $50,000 budget or a $5 million budget, my goal is to make sure that every risk they come up with has an answer, a policy, in less than one page. Now, that sounds impossible, but it's not. If you make them too long, nobody will read them. They have to be written simply, and I say number five, it should be written kind. I like every policy to start off by saying, thank you for being our volunteer. Thank you for being our staff member. We couldn't do what we do without you. Could you remember, in order to protect yourself and to protect our reputation, to follow the following policy? So in other words, it's always kind. It doesn't look like it's jumping on top of you. Number six, document retention. I mentioned it last week, but if your volunteers or employees are working one-on-one with clients, then keep their records forever. This idea of keeping records for 7 years is it's a financial term. It's not a legal term. There's no actual number of years you're supposed to keep your documents, but I would keep my files about staff members and volunteers, their application, any interviews, references you did with them, police checks, etc. I'd keep that documentation on file forever if they work one-on-one with clients, if they're alone with clients. If they're not alone with clients, then I might keep it 3 to 5 years after they leave us. Make sure to always keep all your insurance paperwork forever as well. Number seven, most nonprofits I meet have lots of risk areas, and when you go through today and we talk about screening, you might think, wow, this is overwhelming. What I'd like you to think of is what's one or two things that you can take out of the webinar today that you can actually put into place. So in other words, I really beg you not to be overwhelmed. Some of your organizations, you're going to be really down the road, and you've done many of these things, maybe most of these things, and it might be just an issue of fine-tuning. Number eight, strong risk management requires transparency, and that's the whole issue of making sure, are people coming in to talk to you? I don't know if all of your organizations, if your leaders have offices with closed doors, but probably most of you do. So there's some time each day where people know that your door is not closed, where they can come and talk to you and they can dialogue. And number nine, the final one, is celebrate along the way. If you create a policy, then and with your group, then thank them, send an email, have a cake, do something, put up some balloons, but so people can see that, wow, we're moving forward, and it's really great. Let me tell you, when you do risk management in an organization, especially organizations that don't have a lot of resources, you will keep your volunteers longer and your staff longer when you have good risk management. Staff feel that they're safer, and they're more likely to stay, and we can see that by statistics. So today we're focusing on screening volunteers and paid staff. Here are the 10 steps to screening that I want to focus on today. 3 of them are in the pre-hiring process, 4 of them during the hiring process, and then 3 of them after you've hired the person. So we're going to go through these in detail, and I've sent along 2 documents today that I hope you've opened up. Petra, you sent them? So they were sent from Petra about in the last hour, and they're 2 PDFs along with the PowerPoint that's PDF'd as well. And I want to take you to them now. So let's switch to this document we emailed you earlier, and this is the picture you'll see on the front of it, and it's called Risk Managing Volunteers Screening. So this is the document, that's the front page. So if you can flip to it, if you don't have it available right now, go into your email and look for an email from Petra, and you'll see 3 PDFs, and this is the one we're going to go to. I'm going to flip to it on my screen as well so that we can follow along, and I'll take you through. So if you're on the page, you can take the the page down to a lower number, like 100%, and we'll go through it. So this is volunteer management, including screening. Now this is a document that I've been slowly transforming, and I was transforming it this week even more, but slowly transforming this over the last 5 years. And when we think of volunteer management, most of these principles when it comes to screening have to do with your staff too. You may remember last webinar that I mentioned that legally, volunteers and staff are no different. I've got 2 identical twin boys that, by the way, turned 7 this week. So Jack and Jonah, and they look exactly the same if you were to look at them. I look at them and, you know, I see a lot of differences, but I get it wrong. We've got a deal. If I get their name wrong, I have to pay them $5. So, and it happens at least once a month, and I'll say, Jonah, come here, and he'll say, Daddy, I'm Jack. So he smiles and he goes, you owe me $5. But just like my identical twins that look the same, you know, legally, staff, paid staff, and unpaid staff or volunteers in front of the law are exactly the same. So when you're doing risk management like screening, you have to be very careful to realize that and say, you know what, we really have to make sure that the screening process is very, very similar depending on the risk. So the key, that I love this phrase, and I wrote this document, but I get many of these different ideas from all kinds of different documents. Do what you can when you can. So if you're an organization right now and you've got very little screening in place, you want to think about that. Do what you can when you can. So I want to launch a poll now, a couple of polls. Patrick's going to launch. We're going to launch the first poll. I'm going to learn a little bit of information about you, and we'll go through. Okay, so we're just launching the first poll, and we're going to ask you some questions and get you to answer them. And I'll get to answer, find out some questions, answers to some questions about you. Is it launched? Okay. Okay. You know what we'll do? We'll launch them later in the webinar. So the key principle here is do what you can when you can. And if we get into the screening process, what are the risks? Why are we screening? What's the concern that we're screening for? Well, here are some things that can go wrong from this wonderful book called Better Safe from Linda Graff. You can see her website there, lindagraff.ca. Here's 10 things that can go wrong. This is not just with volunteers, with staff. Well, we can have loss or damage to property. We can have theft or misappropriation of funds. We can have a breach of confidentiality where people find out about, we'll hold off on launching just a second. A breach of confidentiality. We can have volunteers inappropriately speaking or misrepresenting the organization. Number 5, we can have problems caused by volunteers stepping outside their job descriptions. Next week I'm going to show you something called the boundary form, and it's really brilliant. We're seeing thousands of volunteers across the country using these. What it does is it says, look, here are the things you can never do in your role. Because what's happening now is many volunteers, they generally know what their job is. But they often go outside their job description, not because they're bad people, the exact opposite, because they're wonderful people. So let's say you've got people that you've asked to walk alongside new immigrants in your area. You've given them a task. You've matched some of your volunteers to some new immigrants in the community. And we've told them to do X, Y, Z. In the end, we find out that they are doing a lot more, that they're doing all kinds of things we never wanted them to do. But see, they've never had a description of what they shouldn't do. All they did have was a description of what they should do. So next week I'll show you an example of what a boundary form would look like. So that's the greatest amount of problems that we see from volunteers. It's not volunteers who are pedophiles, not volunteers who abuse children. It's not volunteers who abuse elderly people and vulnerable people from other countries. We generally see the vast majority of the problems come from good people who all of a sudden they're doing something so far beyond what they were ever supposed to do. Number 6, they could cause harm to a client. During an event, they could cause harm to a volunteer or a staff member, a member of the public, because of substandard performance, right? So they just haven't had proper training. Number 7, abuse of a client. They could physically, emotionally, sexually, financially abuse a volunteer, be abused by a volunteer. Sometimes it's not that they actually do the abuse, but let's say somebody has Alzheimer's disease or some sort of mental dysfunction where they start to blame the volunteer for doing something. My watch is missing. My money's missing. I had a checkbook. It's gone. And the volunteer never did anything wrong, but they're being blamed, and now you have to stand and defend it. Number 8, you could have a loss of reputation or credibility or loss of public trust due to a volunteer. a loss of ability to raise funds, or number 10, there could be a lawsuit from any of those. So there's some general ideas of things that could go wrong, and that's the reason why we have to screen. The question is, how much should we screen? So let's go ahead. Can we launch the first poll now? All right, so this is the first poll. How many staff do you have approximately? So could each of you click on one of the answers there? Under 5, 5 to 10, 11 to 20, 20 to 40 or more. So go ahead and click. I can see some of you are clicking. Yes, we can see the numbers coming in. That's great. So everybody put down answer at one time, please. Just click on the poll and it'll help me know how many staff you've got. All right, there's still a few more of you that are answering, but we'll just let it stay open for another 30 seconds here. Okay. All right, so 15% said you had 5 to 10 staff, 8%, 11 to 20 staff, 15%, 20 to 40, and 54% said you had more than that in staff. Okay, let's launch the second poll, please. So this is how many regular volunteers do you have approximately? So how many regular volunteers? I know you might have a special event once a year. Let's not include those. These are regular volunteers. So let's go ahead and answer those. I can see people answering. Thank you. So just choose one of those options. Okay, I'll just leave this open for another 15 seconds or so. If you haven't answered, go ahead and do that. Okay, so 55% said you had under 10. 9% said you had 11 to 30. 9% said you had 30 to 50. And 27% said you had over 50. So very different in terms of how you use your volunteers or if you use volunteers for many things. Let's launch the third poll, Petra. Thank you, Petra, for your help. What of the following screening measures do you use when hiring paid staff? And Petra, I guess they can choose, they're only able to choose one? Are they only able to choose one, or can they choose more than one? Okay, so this poll so 100% of you have said vulnerable sector police checks. So that's good. That's helpful to me. If you do vulnerable sector police checks, please choose that. So I noticed that some of you are choosing other ones. I guess in this poll we wanted them to be able to choose as many as you could. But if you do vulnerable sector checks, would you please choose that one? If you don't do vulnerable sector police checks, then please choose something else. So if you've answered anything other than vulnerable sector checks and you do them, please change your answer to vulnerable sector checks. Okay. All right, so just a few more seconds on that one. All right, so 55% of you said that you do vulnerable sector police checks, which of course we know, and I'll mention a little later, there's been massive change since 2010, since summer of 2010 by the RCMPs, which has caused a lot of problems. Okay, that's great. Let's launch the next poll. I think we're going to have the same thing here, aren't we? Okay, the same question for volunteers. The last one was for staff, paid staff. Can you answer this one for volunteers? If you're doing vulnerable sector police checks on your volunteers, please answer that one. If you're not, then please answer one of the other ones. So for staff, it was 55% did the vulnerable sector police checks. And what about for volunteers? 60% of you said you do vulnerable sector checks for volunteers. Okay, well, that'll be the end for the polls for now, and we'll jump over them. That's great. Thank you for giving that information to us, and we'll jump back to the training here. So I just gone through the 10 reasons why you need to do screening. The question is, how much screening should you do? Well, we're going to get to that and go through some really clear information I don't think you can find anywhere else in the country right now. But let me start off with this. Here's 10 tips for managing volunteers and really in staff risk as well. Number one, apply liberal doses of common sense. You know, if you do any sort of list and don't put this in, it just doesn't make sense. The most important thing in law is the word reasonable. And another way you could describe it is common sense. It's so critical that as an organization that whatever you're doing, that anybody around could say, that makes sense, right? And so many things I see coming from law firms, and honestly I'm shocked, and I look at them and go, there's no way volunteers are going to put up with that. An example of that is law firms that are writing volunteer waivers. In other words, waiver forms for the volunteer to sign. I can tell you I am absolutely against this idea. I think it's great for participants to sign waivers, and I train organizations how to write them. But if you're going to rock climbing, you're going to start a program where, let's say your clients are going to teach them how to play hockey, which I know one new immigrant program was doing, which is phenomenal. But would I like those people to sign waivers first? Absolutely. You're going to you're going to try to teach them how to skate and give them a hockey stick and a puck, but they need to know the dangers there. But I would not get a volunteer to sign those. I mean, a waiver basically saying that even if you're negligent, you're not allowed to sue us. Or if you sue us, you will not win. I just think that's incredibly unfair to volunteers, and we've seen them in Ontario quit en masse when they've been asked to sign these things. So that's not common sense to me. Common sense is we're going to get clients to sign waivers, but we're going to get volunteers. We're just going to do our best to protect them as every way we can. The one example of where I would get staff and volunteers signing waivers is something like Habitat for Humanity. We're going to give them a saw, an electric saw for the first time, and you know that's an example where there's extreme danger. Number two, involve your volunteers in everything you do. And whenever you're writing risk management strategies, involve them. Let me just say, board members, and this might be an aha moment you write down, board members should never write operational risk management. They should write governance strategy, which I'll focus on in the fifth webinar we do. But they should never write operational risk management. Why? The reason is that if they're not the ones actually doing it, they're not on the front line and actually knowing what your clients are doing, the risk they face, they won't know how to write it. And you can really alienate your volunteers and staff by having board members write operational risk management. Get your volunteers and your staff to write it who are actually doing the thing that's risky. Number three, provide explicit direction. I have 4 C's that I use, and I didn't write them down here, but you can write them down on your side. What we're looking for is clarity, comprehensiveness, conciseness, or that it would be concise. So clarity, it's got to be super clear. It's got to be comprehensive, so we put the key points in there. It's got to be concise, so it's got to be short, and it's got to be consistently applied. Consistently applied. If you write a policy and you're missing one of those 4 C's, it's going to be a problem. So it's got to be clear, it's got to be comprehensive, it's got to be concise, and it's got to be consistently applied. I hope you have a chance to write those down. Clear, comprehensive, concise, and consistently applied. Number 4, don't assume that volunteers or staff even know what you're up to, what you're after, what the policy means. Never assume. Number 5, praise but prepare to punish. You know, so often nonprofits across Canada, they're really good at telling their volunteers they've done a great job, but they're afraid to get rid of a volunteer who's a disaster. Well, we have to. We have to fire volunteers just like we have to fire staff sometimes. If you've got a toxic volunteer, just like if you've got a toxic staff member, you've got to find a way to get rid of these people. If they're dangerous, you've got to get rid of them. So what if you don't, it's not a situation where you need to let them go, but they do need to be let know that they've done something wrong? Well, do it. Do it. Put a note in their file, just like you put a note in the staff member's file. Keep a paper trail. Number 6, establish policies and follow through. Number 7, ensure your board members know that they're aware of their legal responsibilities, which we'll get to in the last webinar. Provide guidance on privacy issues. You know, it's so important that volunteers know the rules of technology. One of the biggest issues now is social media, and maybe in the future we'll do a webinar focused on that. But I'll tell you this on the side: if your volunteers or staff member are using Facebook or using other social media, just make them aware that if they're going to be taking pictures at your events, that you're clear on what pictures are allowed to be taken. Let me tell you, I know there's some new immigrants in the country that don't want family members or other people to know what city they live in. There's danger that faces them. I've had it happen in workshops, and I take a picture of all the people that attend. I used to do it every workshop. I've done over 200 workshops, and I take a picture at the end, and wow, I'll put it up on the website. And I had somebody come to me after a session and say, you know, I have somebody that's looking for me. I'm in danger. Would you mind not posting that picture? And from that moment till now, I've never taken a group picture and put it on our website. You never know, right? So you should have a clear policy around what you're going to do with pictures and whether you're allowed to post them. Number 9, use written agreements to spell out requirements. Anytime, you know, you're going to have a job for somebody, whether it's staff or volunteer, have a job description. I know right now you're thinking, wow, we don't have any job descriptions right now at all. It's going to take some time to do it. Okay, but just start working towards it. Finally, make risk management everyone's responsibility. This is all about creating a culture in your organization where people, they see something that's going wrong. If they see a client, an angry client, or something that's out of place, that they actually come forward and tell a leader, look, I think there's something wrong here. I'm not sure, but I think there's something wrong here. I saw a client being mistreated. I heard a conversation that I couldn't believe. That people feel free to bring those up. Okay, well, I mentioned there was 10 steps to screening, and I showed them earlier on a chart. They come from Volunteer Canada in a 2001 document called 10 Steps to Screening. And I'm going to go through them in clarity and show you that document in a moment. But if you scroll down here, I want to show you one more thing in this document. There's a ton of things, but I'm only going to show you one more here. And that is on, if you scroll down to here, volunteer and staff screening, look at the position. Here's something that this author did that's really phenomenal. They looked at a specific position, in this case, a volunteer driver. You could put any sort of position in there. And what they did is they answered these questions here. Does this position have isolation involved? In other words, you're going to be isolated. So a volunteer driver would be, imagine a volunteer driver, they're driving one client, maybe to a doctor's appointment. So they're often isolated, just themselves and the client. So from a risk factor from 0 to 10, the person who's the supervisor here said, yeah, that's about an 8.5. Minimal family presence? Yeah, also very high. Just a volunteer driver driving people. Family's hardly ever around. Low supervision? Yeah, it's almost always one-on-one. No supervisor? Absolutely no supervisor. Overnights? No. This job, a volunteer driver, they're never required to do an overnight. You can see these are all risk factors. Intimate contact. Well, that can mean several things. But you know that if you're taking care of children, you have to change their diapers. You have to touch them, hold them. Intimate contact, it comes into play there too. The idea that you may have to lift somebody, that's very important that your people know. You know, they should never be lifting clients for any reason unless they've been properly trained for that. So in this job, they're saying, well, it's occasionally there is physical contact required. High staff turnover. If you've got a volunteer role or a staff role where you've got a lot of people coming and going, might be a problem. It might be a risky place where nobody wants to that job. So that in this place is not the case. Vulnerable clients. Yes, for this job, this supervisor said, yep, we're often the volunteer drivers picking up vulnerable clients. And you can see these different things. So very quickly, if I was just to map out for any volunteer or staff job, I could see how many lines go really to the far right-hand side. I think, wow, I need to do a lot of screening. Does that make sense? So this is the best chart I've ever seen, and it really matches nicely with the 10 steps. If you scroll on one more page, I want to show you here. Here's the different types of screening that can be done. You could do a job description. Pre-application device means if you're posting a job or a volunteer role, you might say, please phone this number if you're interested in applying. And when they phone the number, a secretary or somebody answers the phone saying, do you know that for this job we do police screening, vulnerable sector screening, or we require an application to be filled out. In other words, it gives people a chance, if they're problematic people, to go, oh, wait a second, this nonprofit's pretty serious. They've got a job description. They do police checks. I'm not going to apply, right? You also want to be careful with that, too, to not make it sound too daunting. Resumes, interviews, reference checks. Does this job require any qualification checks? If you're a volunteer driver, we need to see your driver's license and proof of insurance. In Canada, we very rarely ever use credit bureau check. However, can I just suggest, I see us 10 years from now in the nonprofit sector, and I'll still be here training 30 years from now, I hope. I'll be 75. I guess I love doing it. But I do think that any positions that you have, volunteer staff, where they're in charge of the money, you ought to be doing a credit bureau check. They do it across the United States. Very rarely do we do it in Canada right now, but it just makes sense. If somebody's touching money for our nonprofit, we should be running a credit bureau check on them. Just so you know, right now, it's not done in Canada, very rarely, but I think we ought to think about it. And you can see some other things there, medical testing. Medical testing, by the way, I do some work with public health. Public health, if you want to be a volunteer for them, you have to show them that you've had all your immunization shots. Other nonprofits, it's extremely rare. And then finally, probation. Let me just note one quick thing here. I like the idea of probationary periods. If you've got a volunteer job that's quite risky, a lot of one-on-one, it's just a risky role, why not consider for the first 6 months that somebody comes in as a volunteer that they have to be paired up with somebody, right? We're going to get to know them first before we allow them to be one-on-one with our clients. That's one option you might consider. Okay, let's jump out of that document now and look at the other one. There's only one other document that I forwarded on. And here it is here. It's called Safe Steps, a Volunteer Screening Process. In my opinion, the very best document it's ever been written in Canada. It's now 11 years old, and I've seen probably 50 documents. Nothing beats this. And can I tell you, we were able to get it free for you. It's a $30 document that we were able to get for free from you. We just secured that yesterday, so I'm very grateful to Volunteer Canada for that. So let's take a look. Here it is, Safe Steps, a Volunteer Screening Process. This is a 74-page document that is the best, in my opinion, not only in Canada, I think it's the best I've ever seen across United States, UK, Australia, the best I've ever come across. Let's take a look at this. This is the 10 steps of screening. Might I suggest that you think about this for your staff as well? Okay. So if you scroll down these pages, I want you to go down to page number, to the table of contents, and you can take a look here. So in the table of contents, we've got the 10 steps of screening, and you can see how they put exercises, templates. So there it is, step 1, determine the risk. And they've got templates there and so on. Step 2, the 72-page document goes through and takes you step by step, shows you what application forms looks like, shows you what reference questions can be used, what questions you cannot use due to human rights, etc., the different police checked information that you need, and right into supervision and spot checks. What I want to take you to is down to step 1. When you do step 1, you're determining how risky is the job. And I've just shown you one person, Linda Grass, her chart, where she took you through a job and you answered those questions. Is it isolated? We went through the example of the volunteer driver. Well, that's one way you could do it. What Volunteer Canada gave is another option. And by the way, when I say Volunteer Canada, many lawyers were involved in this. Wonderful lady Rachel Corbett was involved in this. There's all kinds of people that went together putting this together back in 2001. Here are the questions that they came up with, and I really like this. If you just scroll down. I'm sorry as we're zooming along here, and I'll bring you this page. Here it is. So if you look at the top left, it's page 16 of 76. Page 16 of 76. Well, this is just the best chart I've ever seen coming across screening. Normally when we look at screening, we just ask a couple of questions. Linda Graff, as I mentioned, came up with that nice chart, which I've shown you. That's phenomenal. And here's the second chart that you might use. When you look at whether or not you should do lots of screening, in other words, the 10 steps, or maybe you're not going to do any screening at all. Well, you took a look at this chart. First of all, the participant. Are your participants low risk, medium risk, or high risk? Look at the example here. By the way, in the top left corner, I'm on page 16 of 76. On the actual document, if you printed it, right now I'm on page 11. So when you start to figure out how much screening am I going to do, we look at the participant themselves. Able-bodied adults, they're low risk. A 15-year-old, a teenager, medium risk. High risk, be a 12-year-old with a disability, an informed senior, or a child or baby. Let me just say this. If someone's brand new to the country, maybe they're high risk. They might be an able-bodied adult. But given the fact they're so vulnerable, this list, I might say that, and you'd have to figure out for your own clients, I might put a brand new Canadian or brand new person that's come to Canada as a high risk because they're so vulnerable right now. If someone tells them, hey, give me $1,000, I'm going to invest it for you, I have a great idea, I can double your money. If you're a new immigrant, maybe your clients, that might be a vulnerability for them. Now, I may not be. I know the new immigrants are very financially savvy, but you have to determine for your client group, where do they fit? What about the setting? Will they be meeting your volunteers in low-risk places or high-risk places? See, low-risk place, a public space, like a library, or a mall, a gymnasium. Those are low-risk. High-risk, they're going to meet in someone's home, or a classroom without windows, a car. You can see a car being high-risk because it's one-on-one. What about the activity they're going to do? Well, if they're going to be playing cards, that might be low-risk. If they're going to be having dinner together, that might be low risk. On the far right, high risk, one-on-one liturgical instruction where they're going to be going through some religious instruction possibly together, that could be high risk. It could be very emotional. Some people, depending on their religion and how seriously they take their religion, that might become a very heated thing. So we might be able to say to our volunteers, look, we don't want you doing these types of high-risk activities. You have to figure out what they would be. Again, what am I using this chart for? We're trying to figure out how much screening should we do on certain volunteers based upon their job. Supervision. If there's always supervisors available, that's low risk. If there's never supervision, it's always one-on-one, that's high risk. Then the nature of the relationship. Short-term, that's low risk. Long-term, high level of intimacy, high level of influence, which I might suggest might be the case in many volunteer and staff relationships when it comes to working with new Canadians. That can get higher risk. They've got a lot of high level of influence. When the Supreme Court looks at lawsuits to determine whether or not a nonprofit or charity was in fact at fault, one of the things they'll look at is, did you give a parental authority to your volunteer or staff member? In other words, is the relationship of the volunteer or the staff member to the client, it's almost like a parent. Wake up, go to sleep, invest here, you should eat this kind of food, go shopping here, don't go shopping there. And you have to think, okay, do we have that kind of intense relationship? So you look at these, and if you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 of these that are high risk, then I might want to do a lot of the 10 steps of screening. So let me just jump back out now out of this document and back to the 10 steps. So here are the 10 steps. So I'm back to the PowerPoint. You've got those 2 PDFs with a tremendous amount of information. You've got access. You're going to have another 8 documents that will be up on our website for you to access later today. Is that right, Petra? The other 8 documents will be up there tonight? Yeah. By the end of today, you'll be able to see them. So that's 10 different resource documents with reference questions, templates, phenomenal material that I hope you'll be able to use. So here are the 10 steps. So the question is, how many of the 10 steps should I use for my volunteer or for my staff member? Again, you need to go back and check the chart. 2 charts I've given you to figure out, is the volunteer role I've got a risky job? If it's not risky, let me give you a crazy example. Let's say you're doing an event where you're raising money and you're going to do a walkathon through your town, and people are going to, you need volunteers are going to hand water bottles to the people that are walking down the street raising money. All they're going to do as a volunteer is hand a water bottle or hand a cup of water to people. Well, honestly, I'm probably not going to do any screening on that type of volunteer. I might do a little bit of training, but honestly, they only have to stand there and hand a glass of water. Now, if I went crazy, I could say, well, they might poison the water. Okay, they might. But ultimately, if we did risk management worrying about people poisoning the water, we could be here all day and all night and we'd never get anything done. What you have to do is determine, based upon your past experience, how likely is it that something bad is going to happen. So a job like handing water out in a walkathon, I might not do any screening. A job, though, where you're going to match someone up with a vulnerable new immigrant, and they're going to meet them one-on-one 3 times a week, and they're going to show them, everything from how to open a bank account to all kinds of things. I consider that to be a very high-risk position, especially going to be driving with them, one-on-one with them, no supervision. They have a lot of chance to influence them. So I might do, I'm going to write a job description number 2. I'm going to have a formal recruitment process. I'm going to have an application for the fill out. All, by the way, I've given many examples of applications in the material you're going to have access to, from public health, from different nonprofit places. And by the way, can I give you another website to look for? This is a phenomenal website if you're dealing with volunteers and staff members as a nonprofit. Google hrcouncil.ca. or just HR Council, HRCOUNCIL. And they've got tremendous templates to use, all kinds of HR issues that can help you as a nonprofit in dealing with your staff and your volunteers. hrcouncil.ca, HRCouncil, COUNCIL. Okay. Application form, conducting interviews, following up with reference checks. Can I tell you that right now, after speaking to nearly 9,000 people, doing all kinds of polling with thousands more, the #1 screening step is number 5. Interviews. What seasoned nonprofit leaders will tell you is they'll find more about staff or volunteers or prospective staff or volunteers from interviews than any other thing. You know, it's tough. References can be tough. But interviews are a great way of really getting down to the nitty-gritty. Let me just jump in with something else I read this week. Really fascinating. Do you know what they're doing with interviews now? Nonprofit leaders are busy. If you're right now busy, can you just, in your chat box or question box, just send me the word yes? Tell me, are you really busy right now? Just send me the word yes, and we'll just take a look and see if you say it. Are you really busy? Yes. And if it's no, then type no, and we'll see what comes up there. I'm guessing you're very busy. How can you do the interview process to make it a little easier, especially when it comes to staffing? Here's a great idea that organizations are starting to pick up on, and that is they're giving them an assignment. They're saying, how would you do this? How would you X, Y, Z? How would you handle this situation? And they give it to them to write an answer at home, send in their answer. And by the way, more than 50% of people won't do it. So they deselect themselves right away. A great idea for getting them to actually say, how would you handle a situation? So has anybody sent in some answers? So we've got yes, yes, a big smiley face. Right, so I know that a lot of you are certainly very busy. The key issue is, how do you use your time more effectively? And that's one thing you can do with the interview process. Give them a question to answer ahead of time. In other words, before you even look at their resume, because you know you get sometimes so many resumes for a job position, ask these people to write an answer to a question. So there's all kinds of things here, follow-up references, and certainly police checks. Let me just mention on police checks, and I'm going to take here, so far we've got 2 questions that have come in. Probably talk for another 15 minutes. If we get time today, if not a lot of questions come in, then we will actually go into police check training. If I don't, there's a document, one of the 8 documents that will be posted later today. It's a webinar I did in the summer with Volunteer Alberta, Volunteer Canada, and myself that I hosted that takes you through the RCMP changes that with vulnerable sector checks, where the changes have happened and how you can basically work with those changes. So that you can find in one of the 8 documents. So if we don't get a chance to do it during the webinar, please go and take a look. By the way, you can email me questions at davidandrewhartley@gmail.com. You'll see my email address later in the presentation. But davidandrewhartley@gmail.com. You can email me any questions at all, and I'll answer those questions in regards to police checks or any questions in regards to the webinars at all. Number 8, conduct an orientation and training session. Well, that's risk management, and so many nonprofits don't do that. They get somebody in, they've done a police check, and they, oh, that's all we're going to do. Well, let me tell you, a police check on its own is very insufficient. What you have to look at is a very risky job, then consider doing all 10 of these, or at least 8 or 9. Number 9, supervise and evaluate. And then number 10, follow up with program participants. Number 10, follow up. What that means is spot checks. I call them customer survey phone calls. I had 2 wonderful nonprofit leaders, both of them in their 70s, in Brantford, Ontario. Both in their 70s, can you imagine? They manage 600 volunteers and have no staff. Now, they've done this for over 25 years. So they know what they're doing, but I had them in a workshop, and they came up to me afterwards. And they said, David, we're tired. We're in our 70s. We don't have staff. What could we do to manage the risk of all these 600-plus volunteers out there? And I said, well, I got a great idea to start. How many phone calls could you make to clients, current clients, right now? Customer service phone calls, spot check phone calls, and simply ask the question, we're just phoning, we know you use our program. So imagine you have a new immigrant program, and you phoned up some new immigrants that are using your program, and you said, how's it going? How are we doing? You're not saying, is anything bad happening? It's not a witch hunt. You're simply asking, how are we doing? It's a customer service survey. Now you give an opportunity for your clients to say, you know, the volunteer I've got is phenomenal. Here's the things they do. And you can pass along that praise to them. Or they might say, the volunteer or staff member drives very fast when I'm in the car, I'm really nervous. Or, you know, they asked me to loan them money last week. And you could say, really? Can you tell me more about that? And now we find out about a risk that we had no idea was happening. So those spot checks are what I call customer service surveys, and they can be done in a very positive way. Your volunteers know that you do these steps. By the way, I don't believe in any hidden risk management. Whatever risk management you do, let your volunteers and staff know exactly what you do. If you've got a website, you can put it up and say, look, here are the 10 steps of screening we do. You know how great that makes clients feel, and especially members of the family of clients, when they know that you're taking time to make them safe. Members of family of your volunteers. You know, my wife volunteers. I'm very concerned. She often works in risky environments. I'm very concerned to know what risk management is being done to protect my wife. So you're going to keep your good volunteers longer. You're going to keep your good staff longer. And your clients are going to feel a certain measure of safety as well. So those are the 10 steps of screening. You can go into that document, Safe Steps, 78 pages, the best document on screening, and I hope you're going to find it very, very useful. Well, it's 11:26, and I'm cognizant of the time. Have we got more than 2 questions now, or have we still got 2? Okay, so I'll spend a few more moments. We will end exactly at 12 o'clock today, I promise you. So in all of these webinars, we go from 10:30 and we go right to 12 o'clock. So here's a couple things I wanted to mention. For your use later, and I think of the document that you got, it said that we were going to send them to you, but we're not sending them to you. We're posting the 8 documents on OrgWise. An example of what we're putting there: sample volunteer screening forms, smart tips for recruiting and keeping volunteers. By the way, those smart tips are very valuable. And that's not risk management so much, but I really like them. I thought you might find it valuable as well. By the way, if you've got great resources too, I'm sure we would love to see them as well, and we could post them up on OrgWise. Is that fair to say? So Petra's giving thumbs up here. And if you've got a great document that you use for recruiting, for screening, for anything around risk management, a template you've created, send it to Petra. We're going to put these things up on OrgWise. We want this to be a place where you go and you're very comfortable going in and out, and finding great stuff. You're going to find prior webinars there. All 5 webinars we do will be posted there, and all kinds of things. Understanding police checks, and then the recent RCMP changes. By the way, the understanding police checks, I got somebody from, is the forum? Should I be saying forum instead of OrgWise? Okay, so it's the forum. So you might know it as the forum or OrgWise. That's where we're putting them, right? That's where we're posting these things. So the recent RCMP changes, a webinar I did in the summer, that's posted there. Understanding police checks. If you get a police check back and you're wondering, you're told that there's a level 3 assault. And by the way, across Ontario, different communities get different police checks. But you're told that this person has committed a level 3 assault. What the heck does that mean? Go to this document. It describes, I had worked with somebody from community service to put this document together. It describes what the different charges mean. Okay, so it's all kinds of stuff. 8 documents there that you're going to find very useful. Here's a screen that you don't have that I got hold of yesterday, and what I can tell you is we will make sure that this is available for you where you go to find the documents. This is the 10 steps put in another way. Okay, so we're starting off with position descriptions at the top right that come out of your missions and mandate. It goes to clearly outline recruitment strategies and application. By the way, this is best practice. Do I think that most nonprofits right now do this? No way. Very, very few do these. So if you're sitting there going, we don't do any of these, don't worry, it's normal. What could you do? Could you do 1 or 2? Start off with, figuring out how scary the job is that you're asking people to do. If the volunteer role, and break it down piece by piece. Let me tell you what public health does. I did training in public health with Sudbury, and you'll see all of their documents, by the way, in the 8 documents, the exact questions they ask for the reference checks, the exact questions on their statements. You're going to find it in the 8 documents that you'll see posted later today. You know what they did? They listed every volunteer and staff job. By the way, notice that they didn't differentiate between volunteer and staff job. And they listed every volunteer and staff job, and I think this is a great idea for you as a nonprofit. If you're writing down an aha moment today, write down every job and then simply ask, which of these jobs involve working one-on-one with vulnerable clients? Which of these jobs involve working one-on-one vulnerable clients? So if I wanted to ask just one question, to determine how risky the job is, that's where I'd go. Which of our jobs, staff and volunteer, involve working one-on-one with the vulnerable people? And you have to think about vulnerability. You know, it's a very tricky thing. If you've gone through a divorce this year, you're vulnerable. It doesn't matter if you're a healthy adult or not. If you're going through a bankruptcy, my dad was a medical doctor who went through bankruptcy, lost his house, lost everything, got to see that. You know, I don't care how strong you are, you're going to be vulnerable for that period of time. So you have to think big picture vulnerable. But if you're going to be putting people one-on-one with vulnerable people, you need to do a lot of these steps and really work towards it, right? And you notice there it goes through orientation, training, to supervision. And we'll be talking about supervision next week and some great things that I think you're going to find very useful in terms of performance assessment. So I hope you come back next week as well. Okay. So are we still at 2 questions? Okay, so I'll go a few more minutes here. The 4 Ps of risk elimination. I really like this. When you're looking at risk, you have to look at positions, people, the persons themselves, physical environment, and performance management. I'll talk about some of this next week, but I want to get in detail, especially about people and positions. When you look at your positions, you have to ask these questions. Are there changes to the volunteer or staff position that could be made to prevent harm? In other words, have we got positions right now where I look at it and go, you know what? We've had harm happen. We've had issues happen where people have been harmed, either clients, volunteers, staff members. Could the position be changed in any way that would diminish the risk? Are there dimensions to positions that can be stopped? You know, when you look at risks, and I get a chance to do risk assessments with a lot of organizations, I like to say, and this is what working with a lot of other people that do risk, 90% of the time when I go in an organization, 90% of the activities are fine. They need to be tweaked. We need a policy written, maybe small changes. And about 10% of the activities or issues that we see, they just need to stop them. They're doing things they should not be doing. So if you think of that a 90-10 rule at risk, and I think it's pretty fair, it's almost certain that in every nonprofit there's something going on that needs to be stopped. Well, what is that, right? So that's the position. What about the people themselves? Are there changes in the volunteer or staff position that can be made to prevent harm? Well, in terms of managing the people, I've got upgrade screening, and I've just gone through with you what I consider to be the very best screening protocols that you could do. So you have to think, do we need to increase our screening? In team environments, you could create supervisor positions that require more advanced skill sets, right? Make sure volunteers are properly oriented, and the 4th dot there, periodically rescreen for certain qualifications. So there's some things you got to come back and do again. I get asked the question, I would say one of the most frequently asked questions I get asked in the last 5 years, certainly hundreds of times I've been asked the question, how often should we do another police check? Well, my first answer is, how much money do you have? There's a lot of nonprofits. You know, in Ontario, 45% of nonprofits in Ontario, the 45,000 incorporated nonprofits in Ontario, 45% of them have an annual budget of less than $100,000. So you think about it, you think, well, most nonprofits have very low budgets. So they're very nervous about anything that costs money. Well, one thing you could do is you can pay for the police check up front, and then after somebody has volunteered with you for 6 months, give it back to them. Like, it's a way of saying thank you for staying with us. Thank you for still being our volunteer. So you front the money, or they front the money. They pay for the police check up front. Once they've been your volunteer for 6 months, you pay it back to them. It's a great way of saying, you know, it's a way of seeing if they're really, really interested in being a volunteer. Some organizations, they're just desperate for volunteers, and they're just paying for them. They're having to find ways to do it. But once you've done a police check, let's say, how often should you do it? Well, my recommendation is, if the job is a risky job and you've already determined you need a police check or even more, a vulnerable sector check, which looks at not only the regular police criminal CPC, but also looks at, has this person, could they be on the sexual offender list? 14,000 people are on the sexual offender list. And so that's what the vulnerable sector check looks at, not just the regular police check. It looks to see if the person is on the sexual offender list, which is tricky now because the RCMP changes, which you can go read on the webinar later on today if you like. It also checks to see local indices. Have this person had local contact with the police? So it does a really good job. Well, if you've decided that you need a vulnerable sector check because you're working with vulnerable people, I would suggest you do it every 3 years. And in the years between, you have them sign a simple form. We call it an affidavit. You can Google affidavit. and say AFFADAVIT, affidavit, and you can get a simple form that says that nothing has happened since the last police check. So they just sign. It doesn't cost you anything. And you drop it in their file, and the volunteer or staff member is just saying nothing's changed. So year 1, police check. Year 2, affidavit. Year 3, affidavit. Maybe I'll have another affidavit, and then, so every 3 years or 4 years, whatever you can afford, every 2 years, very much determined on what you can afford. The physical environment. Well, in terms of risk managing, we've also got to look at that, right? Where possible, confine volunteer activity with vulnerable populations to your premises or to a public place. Now let me know, I know for a fact that when we're dealing with new immigrants, and I've worked with the HOST program, Catholic immigration, so I've done some work with the new immigrant risk management, and I know that most often, very often, you're going to be working with your clients one-on-one. And often you're going to have to do it outside of the building. Well, when you do that, you've got to ramp up your risk management. That's the bottom line. If it's in your building, then the question is, you know, if they're in rooms, do they have windows in the rooms? I always like to see it when I do a walkthrough in any organization. Do the rooms have windows in them so that there's that sense at least of protection that way? And I know with some new immigrants, there's going to be some people that are going to only want to meet with certain types of people. What are we going to do? We're going to have to create some sort of policy around that as well. Take special event revenue off-site for counting and bagging rather than asking volunteers to do so. If you have any involvement with cash, let me just say right now, insurance companies, you'll notice if you're doing renewals, they put the cash question now right up front. Do you deal with cash? They want to know. It's a big risk area. So you want to make sure the same person who's counting it is not the same person who's putting it in the bank. There's always 2 different people involved with cash, right? And then there's some other ideas there too. That's the physical environment. And finally, physical performance management, and I'll talk more about that next week when we deal with that issue. Let me just finish off with a couple other issues. What about short-term volunteers? What if you need a volunteer, but they're only going to be with you for 1 week or a special event? Well, you've got to be practical, right? You just don't have the ability to do a job application maybe and all the 10 steps of screening. But the thing is to figure out what risk is involved in that role. Maybe what we're going to do, see the final dot there? Maybe we're going to pair them up or group them up or team volunteer positions up with people so that they're not one-on-one, right? So that's one idea. There's a bunch of other ideas here in terms of buddying, some other things you can do. Here is a thing that I thought many of you might be very interested to see. Have you ever considered getting your volunteer to sign an agreement? Here's an example of a volunteer agency agreement, okay? Now, I've got it here in one page, but just because it might be very small, I've broken it down into 2 halves here. So here's an example of, obviously you could write this in any way that fits you. I've also got another example that I've put you with the 8 documents you can look at later today. But here's one example. So you can see in the middle there, we, let's say XYZ Immigration, New Immigrants Agency, agreed to accept the services of Donna Smith beginning June 1st. And we commit to the following. We're going to provide adequate information, training. We're going to ensure diligent supervisory aid. You know, whatever it is that you can say, here's what we'll commit to you. And then in the bottom half of the document says, what are you committing to as a volunteer? Well, you agree to serve as a volunteer, commit to the following. To perform your volunteer duties to the best of your ability. To meet time and duty commitments. To provide adequate notice so that alternative arrangements can be made if you can't be there. To adhere to agency rules and procedures. To accept supervision, to abide by the limits of our description. I love seeing this word when it comes to volunteers because so often volunteers, they are being told, okay, here's what you're going to do, here's your duty, but they haven't been told what the limits are. So next week I'll talk to you about boundaries. I think it's going to be very important that you attend and listen to that one. And bring your questions, by the way, because we want to get your questions live here. Number 5, to accept that becoming a volunteer is not automatic. Agency has the right to release me from my duties at any time. Do you see that? That number 5 there is so critical. Do I believe in volunteer signing agreements? Yes. Do I believe in volunteer signing waivers? No. So I believe that they should say, you know, here's what we're responsible for. And by the way, we start off by saying, here's what we're going to give you. By the way, when we talk about board management, the last webinar, I think board members should sign these too. They start off by saying, here's what we're going to give you as a board member. And number 2, here's what we expect you as a board member. Okay, so here's, I think, a great idea. It's some sort of agreement form like that. Okay, so we still, how many questions do we have now, Peter? 2 here. And so 2 more, so we got 4 now. So you know what we're going to do? I'll answer the 4 questions, and then we'll come back, and you can see we got 4 questions total.
No, 3 questions and a comment.
Okay, wonderful. So what we'll do is I'll get 3 questions and a comment. If we've got time, I'll come back and we'll look at these controlling risks. However, I can tell you I've written them very straightforwardly, and you can look at them later. So we're jumping forward up to the Q&A. Okay. All right, so the first one is a comment. I believe screening is very important, but most importantly, orientation and training are also crucial. Also, I believe screening or training for personal habits or traits such as dependability and conscientiousness can yield significant return on investment for organization. So the mention in here is about looking for screening for personal habits or traits such as dependability and conscientiousness. Absolutely, I love that. And you notice in the volunteer agreement we just showed too, we're asking them to sign that they're agreeing to be dependable, right? The comment continues, in a sector where recruiting volunteers, especially for board members, that encompass gender balance, ethnic and racial balance, which is, I'm so glad you said, is problematic. How do we balance the risk management versus reaching our goal for board recruitment? Well, when we do the last webinar, it will be very much talking about board recruitment. So I hope you're there for the 5th webinar because the focus of that webinar will be entirely on board governance, including board recruitment. Let me just say quickly, though, when it comes to determining do we have the proper diversity, do we have the proper skills on our board, I have a checklist I'm so excited about it. So I hope you come to the 5th webinar because it's a very, very good checklist where you can determine what skills, what diversity, what age groups do we have, what gender do we have on our current board, and what gaps, where do we want to fill them. So as you're looking for new board members, you can see where the gaps are. Let me just say this. For board members, one of the biggest problems is nonprofits have created a bylaw, and the bylaw states we have to have 8 board members. Well, that's a huge mistake. What it ought to have is a range. So it ought to, you have to legally have 4 board members on your board. You can have a range saying we must have from 5 to 12 or more than 5. But saying a certain number is really difficult because a board member leaves, they get sick, they get ill, they move on, they leave, they change countries. Now you're stuck with a situation where you need to get a board member right away. So having a loose bylaw where you're allowed to have some freedom in the numbers is a great idea. Number 2, here's the key answer to your question. If you have to determine or choose between having a diverse, skilled board and having a low-numbered board, very few people on your board, take the very few people. I would rather have an engaged board. That means people who actually care about our mission and people who represent the diversity we need and have a low number of board members than to have a lot of board members who don't meet the diversity or the engagement factor. So those are the kind of questions that I'll be answering in the final webinar of our series, and I hope you come to it. So here's some other questions that have come. What are the major changes that occurred in 2010 related to the vulnerable sector screening? Well, you're going to force me to talk about the RCMP changes, and that's okay. All the things I'm about to talk about are in the webinar, which you can go and see in the 8 documents will be put up on the forum by the end of today, right? So let me just tell you the answer to that. So here's the question again. What are the major changes that occurred in 2010 relating to the vulnerable sector screening? Well, here it is. You know that Graham James, you may have heard it in the news right now. He's the evil guy, evil man who abused many or several hockey players, including Thierry Fleury from the Calgary Flames and so on. I don't know if any of you follow hockey, but it's big in the news several years ago when someone came forward, several hockey players came forward and said, this hockey coach abused us as boys. Anyways, so he was put into prison. With our old system, if you came out of prison, you could change your name. So my name is David Hartley. I could come out of prison and change my name to Petra Smith. And all of a sudden, Yolanta Smith. All of a sudden now, You couldn't find me on the sexual database, the sexual abuse database, these people who've been in prison for these sorts of crimes. So the RCMP made a change. When they check you, they no longer check using your name. All they do is check your gender and your date of birth. Because they know name change is very easy. Carla Homoko, who keeps coming out of prison, they're worried she was going to change her name. So instead of doing date of birth, gender, and name, all they check for now is gender and date of birth. So for me, for example, I go to volunteer at your agency. They're no longer going to use my name. My birthday is March 27, 1967. They're going to say male, March 27, 1967. Now let me tell you, there's 14,000 people, almost all men, on that database. Do you think there's another man on that database with a March 27, 1967? I can almost guarantee it. There's only 365 days in a year. There's only so many years in terms of looking at predators. So what's happening now, since they made that change in summer 2010, when you go get a vulnerable sector check and you're a man, many of them are getting flagged and saying, you now need to go get a fingerprint to see who you really are. We want to see whether you're the person who's on that sexual database. So you can imagine, for men that are going to volunteer right now, it's terrible. If they never committed a crime, it's not them, but they're a male with the same birth date as another person who is on that database. What has it done? It has created havoc in our country. RCMP did this without talking to charities and nonprofits. So from Big Brothers Big Sisters to the host program to all kinds of programs, there are very few females get flagged for this because there's, that's just the reality. There's not as many women who commit these horrendous crimes. So the bottom line is that when you go to get a vulnerable sector check, or your volunteers or your staff go to get one, they may be flagged. It does not mean that they have committed a crime. It just means they got to get a fingerprint. And guess what? It may take 6 months to get those fingerprints back. So you can go to our Police Check webinar, the RCMP webinar, that's going to be posted by Petra later, and you can see exactly all of this information. Let me just tell you this. What are nonprofits doing right now with those people? Well, they're pairing them up. Until they get the fingerprint checks back and get cleared, they're pairing them up with somebody, because what else can you do? Great question. Next question. What are some models? By the way, it's 12 minutes before 12, and we will finish exactly at 12 o'clock. What are some models or promising practices of managing volunteers in the absence of a volunteer coordinator? What a phenomenal question. Well, most of the nonprofits I deal with do not have a formal volunteer coordinator. They have somebody who does several jobs. I always like to say in the nonprofit sector, if they can't give you a raise, they'll give you a better title. And that's, by the way, not a good risk management strategy, because if you call somebody a director, and that means they're more legally liable as well. So if somebody's offering you a nice title but no more money, I don't suggest you take it. All you're doing is making yourself more risky legally. Having said that, let me tell you, it's a very safe place to be in Canada, be a charity with proper risk management strategies. Much better to be in Canada, where we have no legal protection, than to be in the United States, where they have lots of legal protection and they're in much, much worse trouble. We're a relatively safe place. I've mentioned to you the lawsuits that have happened in the last 10 years. What are some models then of managing volunteers in the absence of volunteer coordinator? Well, if you've got a lot of volunteers, if you get up there where you're having dozens of volunteers and many dozens of volunteers, you're going to have to find funding to create a coordinator. So let me just say it off right off the bat. You cannot have dozens of volunteers and have nobody responsible for them in a full-time or a very full-time way. So having said that, if you have less than that in terms of volunteers, how can you do risk management without having a person who's responsible for them full-time? Well, here's the answer. It's always my answer with these types of questions. What is reasonable? How many hours, what type of skilled person do you need to put on this job to be reasonable? And what I mean by that is, let's imagine I come to your organization today, and I don't know where this question is coming from. I don't know how many staff you have or volunteers. Let's say I come in today as an outsider, and I just take a look and I see how many volunteers you have and what the volunteers are doing. And I look at questions like, are they driving? And if you're in Canada and you're driving, this winter's not a good example, but it's a question of when it's snow, they're going to call and say, hey, should I be driving today? I'm supposed to go meet somebody today, but the roads are really bad. What do I do? Or I'm taking new medication today. I don't feel so well. So we know when you're volunteers that are driving and nobody for them to contact. That's really tricky. So let me just go to the very basic model. And by the way, if you're still on the phone right now, please write this down no matter what. Just let this be a critical moment for you. The number one risk management strategy for managing staff and volunteers is to make sure that everybody is carrying an emergency contact list. In other words, you know, as a volunteer, as a staff member, I know who to call if there's trouble, if I don't know what to do, if I'm not feeling well, if I promise to be somewhere but I can't. Even though there's no volunteer coordinator, there's got to be a list, right? There's got to be 2, 3 people that I can call. Now, in working with new immigrant programs, I know this can be a dilemma because I've had people tell me, David, I'm not comfortable giving my home phone number because I'm never going to stop working. If I give my cell phone number or my home phone number, I mean, people have questions about where to go to bank. You know, all kinds of questions. What am I going to do? Well, here's my thing. You might rotate. You might figure out something. But in my opinion, if you've got volunteers working all hours of the day with clients, then they need somebody to call all hours of the day. Find a way to do it. So that's the best answer for that. Please make sure, everybody on the phone right now, that if you don't do anything else from this webinar series, and there's one thing that you do, that you create an emergency contact list for your clients. Is there another question? Okay, that's it for questions. Well, it's 11:51. I just want to go back and end off with a few points. One, I just want to give you my email address. I'm here to help, and I'm very grateful for the chance to do this. And so if you send an email, if it's just a one-off simple email, there's no charge to anybody for that. If it's something where we need to do more work, like get involved and do something intensive, then there's charges for that, and Ocasio has a program for that. But just straight off on emails, you have an email question about it, please feel free to do that. There's no charge for that to Ocasio or to you. Let me just go back. Is risk management worth it? Is all this screening worth it? You know, I mean, you're thinking, well, we're so busy. You know, it's going to take time. The answer is yes, it does. It does require a strong commitment to stay with it. But it creates really a healthy organization. I'm not a big fan of the term risk management because often it sounds like it's this little corner thing. We need to do risk management training. Really, it's healthy management. This is about creating a healthy organization where people are safe, but more than that, where people are able to give their ideas when they have them. People are able to say when something's not working, right? So, you know, I do appreciate the day-to-day reality of too much work. And you can just feel like, you know, I just can't do anything. But the reality is you can start slowly, right? You know, things like creating an emergency contact list or creating that risk map, which I talked about in detail last webinar. What a great thing to do. You know, stay with it. What does it do in the long run? It creates a safer program, less exposure to liability, which means you have less a chance of a lawsuit, and certainly way less chance of losing a lawsuit, and you have better services. So, you know, really critical as we go through the pieces from the very first webinar until the 5th webinar, looking through financial risk management, governance management, all these details. You're going to create a safer program. Your reputation is going to improve. You're going to have a better chance of your funder continuing to give you money. Why? Because they feel it's safe. Funders, by the way, more and more, I work with the Ontario government quite a bit, and you know, with the whole TPAD that's come out and all these different issues that have come out, the issue of transparency and risk management have become critical. And more funders are going to look and see, should we give this organization money? Could they get us into trouble, right? So safer program, less exposure to liability, better services, and I've added better chance of continued funding. Whatever efforts you dedicate to risk management will seem small when compared to the resources that a single tragedy could demand. I don't know if anybody out there has had a tragedy happen. You've had a client die, you've had a client get severely injured, had a volunteer die or get severely injured, staff member. But let me tell you, it's hardly able to describe the feeling that can come over a nonprofit over that. And then you could think back and think, I wish we had created an emergency contact list. I wish we had taken a few moments to consider the riskiness of the positions that we face. So I want to save you that. You know, start off slowly, but take it seriously. Now, I said earlier today, I'm going to end off with this. You know, I hope some of you had some bright ideas you wrote down. Can you write down and just type into the question box how many bright ideas you wrote down, or how many ideas you wrote down inside, or maybe you circled them, or some way just identify the things that you think you might be valuable for your organization. So just go ahead and write. If you came up with 3 things, you wrote down 3 things, just write the number 3. 5 things, 10 things, you know, how many ideas that you could actually use as an organization. So I've got there 2, got a 3. Any others? So just write down how many ideas came up today that are valuable that you think you could use. There's a 3. So I think we have 14 on the line right now. 13, thank you. So 2, Luciana, thank you. Juanita, Lily, Valley, 13. Paul, 2. That's great. So, you know, the bottom line is we want to make sure these are practical for you. We want to make sure this isn't just training, but it's something that you could turn around and make useful right away. So thank you for that. Well, it's 4 minutes to 12. We're going to end. There's no new questions that have come in. I want to thank you for being on the line today. We're really grateful. I really hope that you're going to find that as we go through these 5, that you not only find them useful live, that you'll be able to share them, the recordings later on. There's going to be 8 resources going up online that you haven't seen yet that will be up later today on the forum. And we're really grateful that you'll make use of that. If you have any difficulty signing in to the forum or anything you want to know how to sign the forum, just send Petra an email and she'll help you. We're really grateful. And let us just end off by saying we're thankful for all the good work that you do every day.